Hello everybody, myself Dr. Shivkumar B. Sarpur, Associate Professor, Department of Education, Karnataka State Akka Madhavi Men's University, Vijaypura, Karnataka State. Today we shall study language, mind and brain. This is a CTE course at Ignou. In that CTE 01 Block 2 Unit 7, that is language, mind and brain. In that, let us see language and mind, acquisition of language, language and brain, and the other related aspect of the language. So, language is the basic ingredient of human activities, right from mundane day-to-day matters to the expression of our most complex thoughts. It has long been accepted that the brain is the source of human language and cognition. Because of the awareness of this interrelationship, one of the ways of investigating mental processes has been through an investigation of language. The conceptual knowledge that we possess about the world around us is expressed through language. What is intriguing is the fact that the complex interrelationship between different and complex concepts which we have imbibed is easily available to us. The point then is that this easy access indicates some kind of organization in our mind. So, to study the study of language and mind aims to model the workings of the mind in relation to language. The study of language and the brain is different because it does not attempt to relate its findings to physical reality. Since structures and connections in the mind are inevitably unobservable, researchers put forward hypotheses based on fragmentary clues. What researchers look at while studying language and mind is the storage, comprehension, production, and acquisition of language. See, let us see. First one, storage and comprehension. The human mind is said to be the executive of our life, guiding our actions. It is the repository of memory, holding knowledge for further use. But how is this memory organized? So let us see structure of memory. In 1968, Richard Atkinson and Richard Sheffrin proposed a three-stage model of human memory. So that is sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. Our sensory impressions are first held in sensory memory. This memory system holds a large volume of information but loses it in a few seconds. Information lost from sensory memory is lost forever. However, a certain part of this is transferred to the short memory. So, which is in short form also called as STM. The short memory has a limited capacity for storage, around plus or minus 7 mnemonic units. The new information displaces the old, and when that happens, the displaced fragment is also forgotten. But information may be held in the short term memory through repetition. The longer a piece of information is held in the short term memory, the more likely it is to be transferred to the long term memory or LTM. The LTM is seen as a storage system which can contain information practically forever. Apart from being storehouse of information, LTM is also an active mechanism for information processing. The volume of the LTM is for all practical purposes unlimited. It preserves in large quantitative various kinds of information, ideas, and connections between them indicates incidents, events, words, practical rules, etc. Since we are interested in the representation of knowledge in memory, it is the long term memory which interests us. Interests us. It is here that the information is stored, and even though it is not being constantly used, it can be accessed anytime. The most widely accepted belief about the nature of long term memory is that information within it is organized in a systematic manner. There is a growing body of knowledge that seems to suggest that specific information is recorded within a well structured and highly practical network. This concept implies that new information which enters long term memory does not require the creation of a new network. Instead, the new information is adjusted within the already existing organizational structure. Okay. Now the we have let us see episodic and semantic memory. In 1972, Endel Talvin suggested that there exist two separate memory systems, the episodic and semantic memory. The episodic memory stores information about episodes and events and relations between them. For example, a birthday party or a first flight, etc. Episodic memory is susceptible to change and loss, but is an important element in the formation of a base of knowledge of events, places, people, meetings in the past, etc. The semantic memory is the storehouse of words, concepts, rules, and abstract representations. It is unnecessary for the use of language. It contains general knowledge about the world which does not carry any temporal or autobiographical information. In contrast to the episodic memory, where information is far more susceptible to forgetting or loss as new information is constantly entering, the semantic memory is activated comparatively less frequently, and hence information contained within it is more stable. Our ability to quickly and effectively process different kinds of information in semantic memory is an indicator of the excellent organization of this memory system. Semantic organization involves grouping of concepts close in meaning as also the internal links between them. But in a world filled with a large number of objects which are related to each other in a complex system of relations, the task of organizing them into an internal representation in human memory cannot be undermined. As a result, there have been many attempts to try and explain how this is done, and even today, there is no consensus in the matter. Next one, concept organization in semantic memory. Semantic organization is normally viewed as the group of elements which are alike in meaning. Over the years, a number of models have been proposed to explain this organization. According to the clustering model, concepts as represented by words are held in memory in organized clusters of like items. For example, the memory of a specific bird tends to be stored with the memories of other birds. Early experiments simply established this fact that concepts are clustered and did not really look at the way these are related. Set theoretical model shares one feature with the clustering model that concepts are represented in memory as clusters. This model further specifies that words are clustered according to some category, for example, birds, animals, etc., but also in terms of their attributes. Have wings, for example, have wings, fly, have feathers. Semantic feature comparison model. This model further postulates two types of features stored in semantic memory. For example, defining features, those that are essential aspects of the meaning of a word without which an item would not be a member of that category, and characteristic features, those that are descriptive of an item and inessential in determining category membership. For example, for Robin, the defining features would be has feathers, wings, is red breasted, and characteristic features would be what that? Purchase in trees, undomesticated, harmless, etc. Net word models assume that words stored in a semantic memory are connected by links or propositions in a complex network. At its simplest, this can be explained by the relationship A is B. For example, a robin is a bird. This model places every word in configuration with other words in memory in such a manner that the meaning of every word presented in connection with every other word. Parallel distributed processing models represent the latest trend in research on knowledge representation. In other models, a large number of neuron like units compute in parallel by sending activation to the units to which they are connected. The nodes are connected in a network with each mode sending simple numeric messages to the units which it connects. The nodes do not represent anything, rather, a concept is represented by a pattern of activity. Each unit receives inputs from other units, integrates them, and generates an output that is sent to other units. Information processing occurs in parallel through interaction among the units. Then let us see how this interaction and the linguistic process uh, occurs. Okay. Now, acquisition of a language. How do children learn language? How do they accomplish the very difficult task of progressing from a stage where they cannot talk through a stage of simple utterances to more complicated utterances? Furthermore, there are similarities in the development among children in all parts of the world, no matter what language they speak. The question that arises is, why is this so? Language development and general cognitive development are believed to proceed in a parallel fashion in normal children, although the exact nature of the relationship is unclear. Children's ideas about the world and its organization are far from concrete when they are 1 or 2 years old. This process continues to develop for a number of years. The complexity of these ideas appears to affect the order in which the children acquire different structures. The simpler an idea is, the earlier the children are able to map it onto language and so talk about it. More complex ideas like take much longer to get mapped onto language. To some extent, cognitive complexity appears to set the pace for acquisition. Children seem to avoid using words and word endings for which they have no meaning in their world. Also, children acquiring different languages tend to start talking about the same ideas around the same time. Take, for example, the concept more than one. It is only when children have an idea in mind that they look for a way to express it. More toffee to kitty. They were, they very rarely hit on the exact device that adults use. That is, add the suffix to nouns. Children acquiring Hindi would do the same at almost the same stage of development as the children acquiring English. It has been observed, however, that although the children acquiring any two languages acquired the concept of plurality at approximately the same age, the corresponding adult devices are mastered at vastly different ages. This is stated by Omar in 1973. The English speaking children by age 6 and the Arabic speaking children by age 14, 15. This is what they stated in English speaking children at Arabic. Dan Slobin in 1973 argues that this is so because cognitive complexity must be distinguished from formal complexity. The complexity of the linguistic devices each language has for the expression of ideas. That is, within a language, different devices may vary a great deal in complexity. Take the example of the formation of noun plurals in English. This is done by adding the suffixes. The morpheme takes one of the three forms depending on the last sound in the noun stem it is added to. Uh, that is, as in sticks, S as in sticks, Z as in roads, is as in watches. In addition to this, there is a small number of nouns that form their plural differently. Man, men, goose, geese, etc. Egyptian Arabic, on the other hand, uses many devices for expressing plurality. There is a small class of nouns with regular plural that what we have seen a couple of seconds ago, that is plural endings. But this class is outnumbered by the many classes of nouns with irregular plurals, each forming the plural in a different way. Hence, the gap between the first expression of plurality and mastering adult devices of plurality is much wider in children acquiring Arabic as opposed to English. What are the ideas that children express in their early utterances? Within a period of a few months, children progress from using no words at all to using single words and then two, three words combinations. By age, too many of them combine words to talk about a range of objects, relations, events, etc. Children begin by talking about what they already know, and it is usually their surroundings about which they have been actively taking in information for a year or more before they begun to speak. Slobin in 1973 and Sinclair D. Dwart in 1973 believe that children build directly on this knowledge when they tackle the difficult task of mapping ideas and communicative intentions onto language. Now, the last part of the sensory motor period is marked by three other related development at least. See, for example, number one, establishment of object permanence. When they recognize objects and also realize that objects remain in place even though out of sight. For example, if a child hid a toy under the cloth and remembered later where it was hidden. Number two, discovery of tools. This is the stage where they start using an intermediary, an object or a person to get what they want. For example, they get hold of an object by pulling the cloth on which it is placed, or tug at an adult's hand and point at something out of reach. Symbolic play. Third one, symbolic play. This is the stage of pretending. A 1-year-old picks up a pebble and pretends it is a car or pretends to go to sleep. All these developments depend on the children being able to represent themselves actual objects and events. According to Piaget, the ability to represent objects and events is a necessary prerequisite for the acquisition of any system of symbolic representation for knowledge and experience. The child's words then do not appear until the child reaches the part of the sensory motor stage that is marked by deferred what is say initiations, object permanence, tool use, and beginnings of symbolic play. And this happens between the ages of 1, 0 and or 1 or 8. By the time they are more, they are 1 to 1.5 years, children would have gathered knowledge about many objects around them: shape, size, texture, movement, etc. They also become aware of the roles these objects play in the different events. Number one, let us see. Number one, movers. Objects able to move on their own or pick up other objects. For example, humans, pets, etc. Number two, movables. Objects that can be moved, manipulated, but cannot move on their own. For example, toys, building blocks, etc. Number three, places. Places are where other objects are kept or where particular routines like feeding or sleeping are carried out. Example, cot, basket of toys. Number four, recipients are people acting as places. For example, children show things to recipients but objects in their hands or laps. Fifth one, instruments. These are objects used as tools in achieving particular goals. Example, a spoon for eating. These classes and their membership may be very small initially, simply because a child's view of the world is much more restricted than the adults, and they know only a small fraction of what the adults know. However, these classes indicate one way of starting to organize children's specific knowledge about objects, their properties, and the relations between them. This assumes greater significance as they begin to map their ideas onto words. When children use their first words, they begin by talking about what they already know. In a study conducted by Nelson in 1973, animals, food, and toys were the three categories referred to most frequently in the first 10 words of children. Within a few months of their first one word utterances, children begin to combine single words into two word utterances. Now comes language and brain. So let us see structure of the brain. The brain or the cerebrum is divided into two parts called cerebral hemispheres, one on each side. These two hemispheres are connected by the corpus callosum, consisting of about 2 million nerve fibers interconnecting selected cortical regions across the midline, enabling the two hemispheres to communicate with each other. The cerebellum is also divided into two hemispheres and is located under the cerebral hemisphere. It is also involved in motor functions, motor learning, guidance of fine movements, and control of balance. At the bottom of the brain is the brain stem, which connects the brain to the spinal cord. It contains a variety of lower order controls for visceral functions, cardiac, respiratory, etc., as well as the cranial nerve nuclei associated with the movements for phonotation in speech. You can pronounce it as a phonotation or phonation in speech. Okay. Next, language disorders. Very often we come across people who are not able to communicate properly. They are either unable to articulate properly or are not able to comprehend fully or correctly. If they are not able to articulate correctly, there may well be a defect in the articulatory organs of speech, namely the tongue, lips, etc. But these kinds of disorders do not interest us here, for we are more interested in language disorders related to the brain. The areas of study which examine the nature of language breakdown and the relationship between the language and the brain are known as neurolinguistics and linguistic aspersiology. Uh, See, for example, the scientific study of the aspersiology or aspersiology is called as the scientific study of the language brain relationship began in the last half of the 19th century, and detailed description of language disturbances began to be published before the turn of this century. Techniques and concepts from these areas and artificial intelligence and artificial intelligence, which is a new and burning issue and very interesting issue nowadays. This artificial intelligence and neuroanatomical sciences are increasingly being applied to what was traditionally a medical pressure, yielding new discoveries about language disorders, which in turn have led to more detailed understanding of language and the brain. As a result of injury to the human brain, there can be a disruption of the language facility, and this condition is known as aphasia. The damage in aphasia is always physical, typically resulting from brain injury, cerebrovascular accident, or disease. It is often the case that someone who is aphagic has interrelated language disorders. Consequently, the classification of types of aphasia is normally based on the primary symptoms of an aphagic who is having difficulties with language. For example, Broca's aphasia. The French surgeon Paul Broca in 1864 proposed that the loss of language ability always correlated with the damage to the left half of the brain. For 3 years, he had studied aphagic symptoms in patients who, at autopsy, were found to have brain damage to the left frontal lobe. Broca was struck with the contrast with a right hemisphere damage, which seemed to have little effect on speech. The area which Broca identified and the aphasia associated with it came to be known as Broca's aphasia. The patient suffering from this has symptoms ranging from extreme difficulty in articulation to agrammatic speech, where strings of words without grammatical markers or function words are produced. An example of speech produced by someone whose aphasia was not severe is the answer to a question regarding what the speaker had for breakfast. That is, one I eggs and eat and drink coffee breakfast. I mean, one eggs and eat and drink coffee breakfast. There is no meaning in this. And this is what the symptoms we will see. Okay. In Renkel's aphasia, Renkel's aphasia. Let us see. In 1974, 10 years after Broca's discovery, Carl Renke, a 26-year-old researcher in Germany, made another breakthrough. He noted that some people who had no damage to Broca's area and could produce a steady stream of speech with no loss of grammatical markers or trouble in pronunciation, but the content of their utterances ranged from puzzling to meanings. Brocos aphagic seemed to understand language but could not produce it fluently. On the other hand, Renkis aphagic could produce language apparently fluently but faced severe comprehension problems. He proposed that the mind chooses words to convey its thoughts. Once that is done, the message has to be transmitted to Broca's area near the precentral motor cortex where the movements of speech originate. There, the message is encoded into commands to the tongue, lips, and other articulators and emerges as speech. Now let us see aphasia and related disabilities. Granick in 1952 described various disorders comprising aphasia and related disabilities. Number one, motor aphasia. There is an apparent lack of kinesthetic feedback, such as that the patient may be aware of the sound or word he or she wishes to articulate, but he or she is unable to produce the correct output or to recognize it if he or she has produced it. Number two, difficulty in oral word formation. Here, in contrast to the above, difficulty is manifested at the word level. The patient may be able to pronounce isolated sounds but cannot integrate them into words. Number three, agrammatism or difficulty in sentence formation. The patient uses single words only and cannot utter well formed sentences because grammatical words like articles, prepositions are missing. The speech is slow due to the necessity to search for the single word best expressing what he or she wishes to convey. Amnesic aphasia or difficulty in word finding. The patient is not able to recall certain words. The most difficult are proper nouns, then common nouns, then words identified with subjective experiences, pretty, big, etc. And finally, those associated with strong inner experiences. And next comes anomia, consists of loss of ability to handle nouns. For example, what you write with for pen. I mean, what you write with for pen. And next one, receptive aphasia involves difficulty in understanding spoken language, frequently manifested as difficulty in keeping track of long, complicated sentences. Next one, alexia. This is a reading disorder in which there is a general inability to comprehend the written word. Visual recognition difficulty. This is the inability to perceive the letter or words clearly. Loss of phonetic associations or letter sound connections is the commonest form of alexia, consisting basically of loss of association between visual recognition areas and sound recall areas of the brain. Agraphia and other writing disorders. Difficulty in letter formation may be due to pathology in the motor control areas of the brain. Writing even a single letter involves a series of events, and it is possible that at any stage, there might arise a problem. Difficulty in formation of the written word. Writing requires motor habits, ability to revisualize the word, and phonetic association of sounds with corresponding letters. If one or more of these is impaired, it results in the loss of the ability to write, failure to revisualize the word. The patient suffering from this difficulty tends to spell phonetically since he or she cannot check the correct appearance of the word with any inner visualization of it. Acalculia. It is a separate category of disorder. What is this? Acalculia. It is the ninth one. Acalculia. It is a separate category of disorder, nearly always occurring in the company of other forms of aphasia rather than in isolation. It refers to specific difficulty with calculation or arithmetic. The most serious obstacle to the treatment of the aphasia is that one is not certain what damage has occurred or how extensive the loss may be. It is believed that injury to the right or non dominant portion of the brain alone almost never produces physical symptoms, but damage does not tend to be localized. That children recover faster than adults from aphasia is more a result of the development of the localization of language functions, although this remains hypothetical. We have seen that facility for language lies in the domain of the left hemisphere. The question that comes to mind is whether the right hemisphere's special capacities do not contribute at some stage to language acquisition or learning. Strangely enough, in extraordinary circumstances, the brain's right hemisphere can mimic the left and take out primary responsibility for linguistic matters, although probably using quite different methods. Thus, it seems that the right hemisphere can take on many linguistic responsibilities if initiated early enough. It can learn to read but cannot use phoneme to letter correspondence. That is, it learns each word separately and cannot guess a word represented by the letters cat, C-A-T. It may also store some words, but this is limited to fixed expressions and frequent concrete image related words. However, the right hemisphere has a primary role of its own in some areas related to language. It helps us to understand whether an utterance is a question or whether a speaker is angry. These tasks rely on the right brains, especially that is specialty in handling intonation controls and emotional tone. And these aspects have been reported to be normal even in the case of Broca's aphasia. So, uh, we have examined various theories which are over the years have attempted to and continue to attempt to explain the organization. That is the memory organization of memory system. So, uh, you have to come across language disorders and aphasia and graphia and how this Broca's aphasia I mean leads to where the left hemisphere of the brain when it's damage to this area leads to grammatic speech where the strings of words without function words are used, and we have come across long term memory and short term memory, sensory memory, and wrinkles area also. Hope you have got the information. So wear the mask and maintain the social distance, and don't forget to subscribe this channel. So thank you very much, and read well and score well for your examination. Thank you.